with my colleagues, Brian Pinkleton and Anthony Bradley, I welcome you to what is definitely going to be a thoughtful and thought-provoking set of presentations. We are particularly excited about today's panel on mass incarceration and violence, since it is a timely follow-up to our 2013 Fordham Conference on Jailing for Dollars, the Moral Cost of Privatizing Justice. It is both disheartening that moral discourse on the human costs of incarceration remains so timely, but also uplifting that we have such a renowned speakers to continue to challenge our conscience on these issues. In addition to the incredible staff at King's College that I'm sure Dr. Bradley will mention, we are grateful to our Fordham staff and students, including Lori Maroney, Rima Jama, Cam Rathbone, and Evan Solomon for helping us with this event. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Anthony Bradley. Dr. Bradley is Associate Professor of Religious Studies at King College. He's chair of the program in Religious and Theological Studies and the director of the Center for the Study of Human Flourishing, and he's also a research fellow at the Acton Institute. His scholarship represents much-needed critical perspectives on race, religion, and policy in these challenging times, and these issues are reflected in his 9 influential books, including topics such as Liberating Black Theology, John Rawls and Christian Social Engagement, and Black Scholars in White Space. On a personal note, we are so pleased to collaborate with Dr. Bradley, since after receiving his Ph.D. in Historical and Theological Studies at Westminster Theological Seminary in 2008, we were fortunate that he chose our program in our Masters in Ethics and Society to study ethics at Fordham. And so without ado, I'm thrilled to introduce our most esteemed alumni, Dr. Anthony Bradley.
Good evening and welcome to our second conversation about mass incarceration and over-criminalization at the King's College. Last year we had a conversation with professors at the Princeton Club. We had Professor James Foreman from Yale Law School. We also had Professor John Fatt from Fordham Law School here, and we also had Stephanos Bibas from the law school at the University of Pennsylvania, who was just nominated to sit on the Federal Court of Appeals in the 3rd District. So I would like to welcome you all here this evening. I would also like to thank Dr. Fisher and Fordham Center for Ethics Education for co-sponsoring this event with us. My academic career was changed as a student in the program directed by Dr. Fisher, and I stand here as a proud alumni of Fordham's Master of Arts degree in Ethics and Society, which is under the direction of Dr. Fisher and the Center for Ethics Education. It was during a course in the master's program that first got me interested in criminal justice reform. My eyes were opened after writing a paper for Professor Keith Cruz on trauma and resilience in the juvenile justice system, and the rest is history. It was at Fordham where I learned the importance of having cross-disciplinary foundations in the applications of moral and ethical theory related to the social issues of our day. That should sound familiar to you. And this is what brings us to our conversation this evening and the work that we're doing at the King's College in the center that I direct at our college. At the King's College, we have the privilege of having a very large core curriculum that has the privilege of intersecting politics, philosophy, and economics as our core. And this is directed at addressing issues related to human flourishing. This is what our college is about. The center I direct also takes a cross-disciplinary approach. And it is the mission of the Center of the Study of Human Flourishing at the college that we seek to examine and promote the moral, social, political, economic, and aesthetic practices that lead to human flourishing and advance the common good. Our center activities draw upon cross-disciplinary resources that explore these intersections with respect to moral virtue and public life. It is this cross-disciplinary approach that brings us to our discussion this evening. Before I introduce our speakers, I would, of course, like to thank Megan Phelps. I don't know where she is right now. She's back there in the back. She is our Director of Events, and she is actually the reason this is happening and going so well. So would you join me in giving thanks to Megan? And to all of her staff for helping this event go so well. There has been much talk in the criminal justice reform discourse about the need to address non-violent offenders. While that's a fantastic start, if you look at the data, that's not the reason why most people are in prison. We have a violence problem in this country, and 53% of those in America's jails and prisons are there for reasons of committing acts of violence. And it is the violence and the prosecution of the violent offenders that needs more contemplation. This is what we'll be doing this evening. The data shows that men and women who commit violent and aggressive crimes early in life actually age out of aggression and violence in later years. That has introduced some questions about the utility, the usefulness of incarcerating violent offenders for decades and decades. Well, to help us reflect on these issues, we've assembled a cross-disciplinary panel of people who have done much work in this area. This evening, we will hear from three distinguished scholars. We'll begin by hearing from Professor Barry Latzer, Emeritus Professor of Criminal Justice at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, the City University of New York. Professor Latzer received a J.D. from Fordham University. You may recognize a Fordham theme this evening. And a Ph.D. in political science from the University of Massachusetts. Professor Latzer has devoted the last decade to a major study of the history of violent crime in the United States. His recent book, The Rise and Fall of Violent Crime in America, was published by Encounter Books in 2016. We're also joined by Professor Douglas Husak. He is the Distinguished Professor of Philosophy at Rutgers University. Professor Husak is the author of over 100 scholarly articles and 6 books, most notably Ignorance of Law, published by Oxford University Press in 2016, The Philosophy of Criminal Law, published in 2010, and the book Over-Criminalization, published in 2008, which, by the way, for me personally, is part of the framework for my book that's coming out with Cambridge University Press on mass incarceration and over-criminalization next spring. I actually used Professor Husak's framework on over-criminalization to frame the entire argument in that book. He's been a visiting professor at several law schools and philosophy departments, is currently a visiting professor at New York University here in New York. Professor Husak holds a Ph.D. and J.D. From Ohio State University and has been at Rutgers since 1977. We will also hear from Professor Brett Dignam. Professor Dignam is a clinical professor of law at Columbia Law School. An award-winning teacher, Professor Dignam has supervised students in a broad range of litigation matters. She has designed and overseen workshops conducted by students for prisoners at the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut, on issues including immigration, sexual assault, and exhaustion under the Prison Litigation Reform Act. Professor Dignam came to the law school following her time at Yale Law, where she led the prison legal services, the complex federal litigation and Supreme Court advocacy clinics. Professor Dignam received her JD from the University of Southern California, where she was a student director of the USC Prison Law Project and the chair of the Hill Moot Court Honors Program. She has an MA degree from the University of California, Los Angeles. She received her BA from Mount Holyoke College. Where is that? In Massachusetts. Fantastic. Following the speakers, we'll have a time of question and answer that will be moderated by my colleague, Brian Pilkington. I had to work on that, Brian. Thank you so much. He is the director of academic programs at Fordham's Center for Ethics Education, where he directs the MA program, for which I am alum, in Ethics and Society, and the minor in Bioethics. Before joining Fordham, he taught at Aquinas College and the University of Notre Dame. His research focuses on questions in moral and political philosophy, in particular, the concept of dignity, and in bioethics, where he is especially interested in questions of conscience and moral responsibility and the practice of medicine. At this time, I'll invite our panelists to join me here on the platform, and we'll begin our discussion. And again, thank you very much for coming.